listening to Cosmic Cousins Soul-Centered Astrology. I am your host, Jeff Hinshaw. Cosmic Cousins is an astrology podcast that is dedicated to honoring the interconnectedness of our universal family through embodied health, self-discovery, and deeper learning. Hey, Cosmic Cousins. Welcome back to another week of the show. Here we are for the Aquarius full moon that leads us into Virgo season of 2021. Right now I have a candle lit. I have the star card out on my altar. And little Biji Kazemi is right here next to me, chewing on a bone. So if you hear some chewing sounds, that's what's going on. So we have an exciting episode today because I'm going to invite you into the invitation for the Aquarius full moon, which takes place August 22nd, 2021. And if you're not listening to this live, like if you're listening to this at a later date, know that this Aquarius full moon reverberates throughout all of 2021. So at whatever time you're listening to it, it's going to resonate with you because this is a very Aquarian year. We have both Jupiter and Saturn in Aquarius right now, and we have these two Aquarius full moons back to back. So we'll connect with the full moon in Aquarius, and then we're going to connect to Virgo season, the major transits coming up for Virgo season 2021. And I'm joined with Francesca Mamlin, who is an astrologer, an Aquarius with a Cancer moon, and is also my dog Biji's original foster mother. During our time together, we're going to look into the energy of Virgo season 2021, and Francesca will also share the story about how she invited two Cambodian Village Dogs into her life and how Biji ended up halfway across the world to live with me. So that will come in a moment. But for now, let's go ahead and drop into this Aquarius full moon. So you can go ahead and bring your awareness to your nervous system, to your ankles, Achilles tendon, your calves, and also the energetic body. These are all of the parts of the body that Aquarius is connected to. And I know it's a lot. Aquarius, it expands out. It can be a lot. It's the sign that's connected to humanity. So as you breathe into the nervous system, as you tune into the energetic body, we'll go ahead and transition into our Aquarius full moon download. I evolve, I expand, I know. These are the phrases we have for the Aquarius full moon. I evolve, I expand, I know. You could expand on these phrases, which one of the phrases being I expand. This could be the full moon to do it. So maybe you journal about these three phrases. How are you evolving, expanding, and coming more into alignment with what you know at this time? This is the second full moon in the sign of Aquarius this year. So now is a time of far-reaching illumination and intergalactic integration. This full moon is conjunct expansive Jupiter, the biggest planet in the sky. So emotions may feel heightened and exasperated. This could bring us into extreme highs and extreme lows. So it's very important to bring your awareness into the core of your being at this time, because the energies that are available around us can be quite scattering and dispersing, which is very Aquarian. So bring it back to the core of who you are and then feel the energy expanding. So Aquarius full moon, this could be a time where you're being struck with genius ideas for innovation and also for the distribution of information. Profound insights may come crashing in during this Aquarius portal. So you might want to make sure that you're in a space where you can be open to receiving that. You might find yourself surrounded by others in community. So be mindful if you are around other people that you are spending time with people who also reflect back to you your truth and your vision. because this is the time of opening yourself up to receiving a new vision. This is Aquarius. And if you're not finding yourself in community and you find yourself alone on this full moon, Aquarius is also a sign of being alone. It's Aquarian the contrarian. There's the connection to community at large, but also there could be isolation that brings. And in a year that is so heavily Aquarian, we might be feeling both of those simultaneously. And so this full moon is here to illuminate that in our life. So breathe into the body whatever wisdom this full moon is bringing you. Stay grounded and rooted in your own truth. And the more that you can live in alignment with your values, the more you open yourself up to exciting collaborative and community connections, which might come to some sort of fruition or culmination here on this full moon. Aquarius also brings incredible awareness towards humanity at large, and so this can feel overwhelming if we expand our outreach out too far. And there's so much going on this planet that we find ourselves at right now. And so whatever is going on in humanity, if you feel yourself being pulled out in many different directions, and for those of us with the privilege to have access to the internet, there is such readily available information to connect us around the globe at all times. And while it is important to stay informed, and responsibly so right now, because Saturn is in Aquarius, it's also imperative for us to set really clear, fixed air boundaries as to not shoot out the Aquarian nervous system. So if you do feel yourself overwhelmed right now, over inundated with information, this is the full moon to relax the nervous system. You know, when we look at the star card in the tarot, we see a figure who's completely in the nude out in a hot spring. So I have some questions for us to help channel and focus the energy of this Aquarius full moon. And again, all of this is written out and typed out in my newsletter. So if you are ever interested in reading along with the show notes, just sign up for the newsletter. There's a link in the show notes. So the questions to help channel and focus the energy of this Aquarius full moon. What one humanitarian cause am I most passionate about? What one humanitarian cause are you most passionate about? And how might you bring more of a loving focus toward this humanitarian cause in the year to come? You know, this helps to channel the energy because, you know, Aquarian energy, and if you have a lot of Aquarian energy, you likely care about many humanitarian causes, but finding one that you can really focus and hone in on. Another question for reflection: how might I get more involved with my local community? What healing modalities are aligned with my values for a more progressive future? And what genius new ideas am I ready to share with the world? So those questions I encourage you to sit with and reflect on, and even share them with a loved one or your community. This Aquarius full moon is also extra special because it initiates us into Virgo season. It opens up a cosmic portal into Virgo season 2021. So taking place just hours before the sun enters this lovely mutable earth sign of Virgo. So the full moon is at 5:01 a.m. Pacific Standard Time on August 22nd. And then the sun enters Virgo just a few hours later at 2:34 p.m. on Sunday, August 22nd. So this full moon, since it's so connected to Virgo and Virgo season, it's really taking us into Virgo season. This full moon brings our awareness towards the most intergalactic themes of Virgo. So what you can do here is imagine yourself humbly harvesting wheat. This is Virgo under the starry night sky, which is Aquarius. It shifts it. Right? So why would we be out in a field of wheat at nighttime? We're connecting to these bigger cosmic truths. So what cosmic truths are you channeling into your Virgoan work, offerings, and healing at this time? The best way to work with this energy throughout Virgo season is to acquaint yourself with the asteroid goddesses, who are equally cosmic and Aquarian as they are practical and healing like Virgo. So this energy is really familiar to me because I am an Aquarius Sun with a Virgo moon, and both the full moon and the sun are conjunct my natal placements this weekend. I have a Aquarius Sun at the 25th degree, and this full moon is at the 29th degree of Aquarius. So look to 29 of Aquarius in your chart to see what's illuminating. For me, that's my very sense of self and my purpose, the sun. And then the sun enters into Virgo, so you can look to the 0 degree of Virgo to also connect with this Aquarius full moon and see what cosmic truths are being illuminated in your work. And so what do you have at 0 degrees of Virgo? And so I have my moon in Virgo at the 1st degree of Virgo. So both of these energies are really powerful right now, and to help facilitate you in your exploration with Aquarius and Virgo, I am really, really excited to announce that I have a new offering, and it's the Asteroid Goddesses. It's a 4-part workshop download series that's designed to activate and awaken the cosmic healing in your birth chart and in your life. So if you'd like to learn more, you can go to cosmiccousins.com, and then under workshops, click on Asteroid Goddesses. And essentially, this is to help expand our consciousness to incorporate the energy of the asteroid goddesses in our life, who are very healing. Cosmic healing is what I'm calling it. So these 4 asteroid goddesses, which are Ceres, Pallas, Juno, and Vesta, I'm naming them in the order they were discovered. Ceres, Pallas, Juno, and Vesta are all here as allies for us at this time to bring more healing to this planet. And so if this calls to you, again, go to the website and check it out. And I'd be honored to help facilitate you in this exploration. What's cool about it is it's a 4-week ritual immersion. And so it's going to be taking place during Virgo and Libra season this year. And the asteroid goddesses, a lot of their themes are connected to Virgo and Libra. Ceres is the goddess of harvest. Pallas is the goddess of feminine wisdom. Juno is the goddess of intimacy and partnership. And Vesta is the keeper of the hearth fire, home and hearth. So very connected to Virgo and Libra, but also very Aquarian, very like the star card in the tarot. So yes, I invite you to join me this Virgo and Libra season for this 4-week ritual immersion. There will be a workshop download released on the Virgo new moon, which will be for Ceres, on the Pisces full moon for Pallas, on the Libra new moon for Juno, and then on the Aries full moon for Vesta. So again, cosmiccousins.com to check that out. And that's all I have for you on the download for the Aquarius full moon. It's my hopes that this Aquarius full moon offers you space to fully process and integrate the many upgrades happening in and around you at this time. Before we transition into the transits for Virgo season 2021, I would like to just say that the esoteric phrase for Aquarius could be helpful at this time, which is waters of life am I, poured forth for thirsty friends. So you can meditate on that phrase too. And also, one more announcement. The past few weeks, you might have noticed that Virgo season came a little early this year. The personal planets Mercury, Mars, and Venus have all been in Virgo. So I've been hard at work putting up the Zodiac Queens project on the Cosmic Cousins website. I still have a long way to go, but right now, if you go to the website and click Zodiac Queens, you will see each queen displayed with a link to their corresponding podcast episode when they were crowned. You might even find to attune yourself to this Aquarius full moon, you listen back to the Queen of Aquarius podcast episode. And if you'd like to attune yourself to Virgo season, you might listen back to the Queen of Virgo podcast episode. Either way, those are there for you. And so at this time, we're going to transition into talking about Virgo season for 2021 with astrologer Francesca Mamlin. And I would like to say that my apologies, the audio is not the best. When we were talking on Zoom, I was using my wireless headphones instead of my podcast mic, and I realized I'm not going to do that again because it didn't come through as clearly as I had hoped. But either way, We have a lot of juicy information in there. The talk is 2 hours long. Literally, I invited Francesca to be on the show because we can talk on the phone for hours about astrology. So it had been a long time coming to have Francesca on the show. So at this time, we'll transition into this Virgo season conversation. Okay, so here we are. This is going to be our Virgo season check-in, and this is the first time that I'm doing this here on season 8, and I'm really super excited and grateful to be joined today with a dear friend of mine, Francesca Mamlin, who is an astrologer, the host of the podcast Time Personified, and helps other podcasters produce their show. So welcome to Cosmic Cousins, Francesca.
Thank you so much. I'm excited to be here with you.
Yes, it's been a long time coming. We met through Cosmic Cousins in many ways, I think. And we have a really special connection because you were the original foster parent for my dog, Biji. And so you brought Biji into my life. And so we're going to talk about that today. And let's first start with you, though. I'm curious to learn a little bit about you. So would you be willing to share your sun, moon, rising with the Cosmic Cousins listeners?
Yes, I would love to. So I am an Aquarius Sun. My sun is very close to Jeff's sun. We're just like one day apart, birthdays. And I'm a Cancer moon and a Capricorn rising.
Okay. So that makes you your personal myth, which we do here on Cosmic Cousins, a starry-eyed humanitarian or an innovative humanitarian, Aquarius Sun. And then the moon, in the comfort of your home, Cancer moon, building a future we can depend on, Capricorn rising. Does that resonate with you?
Absolutely. Because I have been pretty much self-employed and working remotely ever since I graduated from university. So it makes sense, the part about being safe at home while building, because I've always been building businesses and building platforms and dreaming big and pretty much doing all of it from the comfort of my home.
Yeah. And you have all these Aquarian themes coming in too, with being the host of an astrology podcast. It's quite Aquarian. And also, I would say helping others produce their own podcasting. You know, Aquarius is really good at helping disseminate information and also helping others in the community to do that too. So I see them all coming together. And have you been working with anyone recently to produce a podcast, or what's going on with your show?
Yeah, I produce my show. I try to be every new or full moon. It's kind of been recently, like when I felt inspired, just because the past year, which we'll talk about, has been very hectic, from being stuck in Cambodia to fostering the pups to moving to Florida. And then through all of that, I also have my podcast clients are ongoing. So I provide people with ongoing support for their podcasts, their editing, their distribution. Some of them I even help with like content outlining. And I'm typically working with the same clients every month. And I'll have periods of time where I open up to bringing new clients into my workload. And yeah.
Right on. So you started to mention Cambodia a little bit there, and in honor of Biji's first birthday, which is coming up, which is September 8th, because you cast Biji's chart, which we could talk about that process too. I'm curious to learn about this and to share with the audience about this story of being in Cambodia during the pandemic. And so anything you'd like to share with us about you meeting these two dogs and bringing them into your life?
Yeah. My year in Cambodia was full of all kinds of stories. I basically, to keep it short enough, I ended up getting stuck in Cambodia during COVID. It was kind of willingly. At the beginning, the borders shut down March of last year, and I happened to be in Cambodia, not expecting to get stuck there. And there were a few months that I was quarantined at a guest house, and there was really no possibility of me leaving Cambodia or going back to the US. And then as things started to calm down towards the summer, I had the choice of I could go home to the United States, or I could stay in Cambodia and not have any kind of fees or anything for overstaying my visa. So I basically chose to stay in Cambodia. I was there for a year. Technically, it was 11 months, but I'm saying that I was there for a year. And towards the end of my time in Cambodia, I moved from Kampot in the south up to Siem Reap, which is one of the bigger cities in Cambodia. And that is where I met this woman named Nicole. And Nicole basically spends her life and her own resources rescuing street dogs in Siem Reap. For those of you who have been to any country in Southeast Asia, you can imagine or you can picture what it's like for dogs in Southeast Asia. It's not a really good place to be a dog. There's stray dogs running rampant in the streets. They're not fixed. They're not vaccinated. So they're just kind of breeding and they're getting sick and they're hungry and they're injured. And it can be really sad and overwhelming when you're in Cambodia, Thailand, Vietnam, like seeing all of these dogs wandering the streets, especially as a Westerner, because we have a very different relationship with dogs. We see dogs as family members, and it's kind of different in Southeast Asian cultures. And so Nicole is, she's German, but she has a few different nationalities, but she lives in Cambodia full time, and this is what she does. And I basically just got involved with helping her out because I've always loved animals. I've always loved dogs, and I'm always here to kind of help out. It's probably my Aquarius Sun. And it was basically for a while, I just helped her. She has 28 dogs under her care. It might be more now. When I was there, she had 28 dogs. And I would basically show up to her house and she would like hand me like 5 dogs on leashes, and I would take them for a walk, and a few more would kind of follow me off leash. And I just kind of helped her with that part of things, getting her dogs out. And then one day she messaged me and she was like, there are these 2 puppies that need somewhere to stay like right now. And she sent me this picture of these 2 little brown puppies on a veterinary examination table. Biji was like in the front. He had his chest all puffed out and Tula was kind of hiding behind him. And I was
post
like,
that picture on the website too, and you can see a picture of Francesca with these 2 pups, which I meant to mention. If you'd like to look along to the visual of our time together, there will be images and charts and all of that up there. Yeah,
I'll make sure. I think I've sent you that picture before, but I'll make sure that you have it. That was the first time I ever saw them, and they came to my house like maybe less than an hour later. They showed up in this like big rusty cage, and then I let them out and they just kind of cowered in my bathroom for several hours. They obviously hadn't had a lot of contact with people yet, and they were about 2 months old. They were super tiny. They were sick. They were covered in ticks and fleas. They had some stomach issues. And also they had lost, they were part of a litter of 6, and their 4 siblings had died of the parvovirus. And that was actually why they were brought to me, is because it wasn't certain whether or not they had the virus. So they had to be quarantined. They couldn't have contact with any other dogs. And I was basically emotionally prepared for like, they could get sick and die. So I was just kind of doing my best to keep these little puppies alive and really hoping that they would be okay. They didn't turn out to like show any symptoms of parvo, and they eventually became these very healthy, energetic, bouncy, sweet puppies that were like terrorizing my life because, you know, people who have raised puppies know that like there's a lot of energy that goes into it. And then I was basically supposed to keep them until they could get their first round of vaccinations. And then I found out that they were basically, and if they couldn't stay with me, they were going to have to go live out on the street. And I couldn't wrap my head around the thought of like letting these puppies live on the street, because they gained trust in me. I kind of became a mother figure to them. And I obviously fell in love with them. They're two of the sweetest puppies I've ever met. And then I was like, wow, like I think I might be the only person who can give them any kind of shot at a decent life. And there was several days, weeks where I was kind of panicking because I didn't really know what to do. I didn't really know how to help these dogs. And then it dawned on me one day that I could try to bring them back to the US with me, because I was kind of considering the idea of going back right as these puppies came into my life. And so I asked their vet, and the vet was like, yeah, like I do this stuff all the time. I can help you with all of the paperwork, with the whole process. And I was like, okay, I'm going to bring these puppies back to the US, because I don't think I could sleep at night if I did anything else. Like, they just had to come back with me. I had to know that they were going to be safe, that they were going to be okay. I'm not in a place in my life where like adopting a puppy is like something that I'm available for. So I just kind of I found them amazing homes in the US. Tula lives with a friend of my mom's and her husband in Ohio. And then Biji ended up with you. And yeah, it was if you're interested, we can go into what the experience was of like bringing them to the US. It was very stressful. I don't recommend anyone does that unless they absolutely have to, but I'm glad I did.
Well, you did mention Nicole is over there and has like 25 dogs right now. So if someone listening to this potentially wanted to adopt a dog from Cambodia, is that an option that's available?
Well, currently, so it was actually weird how this happened. The day that Saturn and Uranus squared each other, the CDC just passed this new, like, I think it's a temporary restriction, but they're not allowing any dogs from Cambodia to come into the US at this time. So, which is too bad, because I was actually coordinating with Nicole to see if we could get some dogs over here, but it's not possible right now in the US. But if you are in another country in Europe, Nicole is actively sending dogs over to European countries. So,
okay. Yeah. So if you're a European listener and you're looking for a dog, I was looking. So meanwhile, while all that's happening, you're taking care of these two dogs and getting them vaccinated. I'm in Portland, Oregon, looking for a dog. I actually moved into this apartment building that I am in now about a year ago. Cancer season of 2020, and I moved into this building because they allow dogs. So I've been like preparing for it for the last few years. And as you were saying, like, you really need to be in a certain place in your life in order to really commit to that. And as you were saying, you were hoping to find Biji a forever home, and you know, that takes a certain level of commitment. And so, you know, as Saturn's entering Aquarius and is in my first house now, seems like a really good time for me to commit to being a dog dad or a dog parent. And so, yeah. And I think you had heard me maybe mention on a podcast that I was looking for a dog, and you kind of kept that back in the Rolodex of your Aquarian mind. And so then you just reached out to me and you're like, I think you said something like, whenever I'm with Biji, you keep popping back up in my mind. And then you sent me that email, and I think it was actually on the Leo full moon of Aquarius season in January of 2021 when you messaged me. The reason I know that
also the day Mercury went retrograde, right? I think
it was also the day Mercury stationed retrograde too. Yeah. And the reason I know it was a Leo full moon, actually the moon had just moved into Virgo. It was right after the Leo full moon. The moon had just moved into Virgo, and I was at Virgo, like the first degree, which is my Virgo moon.
It was your cosmic self day. Yeah.
It was my cosmic self day, which for those of you that don't know what your cosmic self day is, it's when the sun is in the same sign as your sun sign and the moon is in the same sign as your moon sign. And so it was Aquarius Sun, Virgo moon day, which is my combo. And so I always look at the cosmic self day as a way to kind of reattune you to your own unique cosmic energy, but also to open yourself up on your cosmic self day for any insights that might leave little cosmic cookie crumbs into what the next year might be providing for you. And so, of course, like that's the day that I found out about Biji. And there were a few little mystical things that had me say yes, because at first, of course, I was a bit hesitant to invite a Cambodian village dog into my home. And but there were just a few things that kept lining up. The first one was that it was 2 days after I had led the first gathering for the Fool's Journey. And so if you're not familiar with the Fool's Journey, it's a journey that I lead. It's about 6 months long. It's 22 weeks. And so the first gathering is the Fool. And then we go to the Magician, the High Priestess, all the way up into the World. So we go in order, in chronological order, from the Fool all the way to the World. And so I remember saying, I had just applied for a dog. It was a cute little golden retriever named Violet. I met Violet. I took Violet on a walk. I thought everything was going to like pan out. Like it seemed like it was going to be my dog. And then last minute they were like, actually, we're going to go with a family that has kids in a backyard. And it kind of broke my heart. And so I was like, you know what? I'm done looking for a dog. And I just like said a little prayer. I was like, if you're out there, pupper, like just find me. And I just like completely surrendered. And literally I said, and if you are my dog, find me during the Fool's Week. Because the Fool in the tarot is often shown as like this gleeful character stepping off the side of a cliff, but they usually always have a dog with them. And so I always say every fool needs their dog. And so I was like, find me during the Fool Week. And then you message me 2 days after the Fool's Gathering. So that was the first like check for me. And then the second one, there was many, but I'll just share one more, is that his name is Biji. And when you shared with me that his name was Biji, I looked up the translation and it means little seed. And I heard my yoga teacher say, she used to say the Bija mudra, which originally his name's Bija and short for Biji. And the Bija mudra, seed of all life, is Bija. But I heard Lee Evans, my yoga teacher, say the Bija mudra. And then right in that moment, she texted me and she said, hey, Jeffrey, how's your yoga practice going? And I was like, I can't believe that I found out his name Biji, and she texted, like it was in the same moment. And I was talking to you in a text, and then the other text like popped and I screenshot it.
Yeah, you sent me that screenshot.
And then I like, my body like had chills and I was like, this is my dog. I'm doing it. And then, so yeah, I'm sure there's more to the story that we'll share at different times. But this is Virgo season, and Biji is a Virgo sun with a Taurus moon. And so you cast Biji's chart. Anyone that is interested out there in casting a chart for your pet or animal, I'm sure Francesca could offer a little bit of tips here. So what was that process like for you to cast the chart for these two dogs, and why did you do it?
Yeah, and it kind of came to me as I got to know them. When they first came to me, it was the end of November, and I was told they were about 2 months old. So I was like, oh, they must be Libras. And I was like, I thought it was perfect, because I was like, I have one boy and one girl, and they're Libras. And then when I took them to the vet, and it was the same vet appointment actually where I talked about bringing them back to the US with me. She also, in their vaccination record, she had to choose a birth date for them. And she wrote September 8th as their birth date. And then I went home afterwards and I casted the chart for September 8th. And I just kind of felt like this is definitely their chart. And they definitely feel more like Virgos to me, just in their personalities. And then I chose their rising signs based on personality traits that were very prominent. Like I made Tula a Gemini rising because she has these enormous ears. And she has a very strong command of language. Like she would pick up on what different words meant. And Biji would actually follow her lead a lot, but I could tell that Tula actually like understood the words that I was saying to her. And I made Biji a Cancer rising because he is a little softy and he's very sweet and cuddly and sensitive. And I thought it made sense that Tula would be a little bit older. So
yeah. He's a softie, and he can have a hard shell sometimes too. Like he can sometimes, like, he's kind of protective, which I think is Cancerian, but also really soft and loves to cuddle. And it would make sense that they were born within a few hours of each other, Gemini rising, Cancer rising. And so that gives Biji a Taurus moon conjunct Uranus, which I definitely feel, and I've mentioned on the podcast before. And so Biji is a Virgo sun. He's a hardworking harvester in a field of rolling greens, Taurus moon, finding his way back home, Cancer rising. And that sounds just like him to me.
Yeah.
In the field of rolling greens, though, we can add a little bit of Uranian energy. And so he's like rolling around in the mud. Like lightning. But yeah, even when you said September 8th, I hadn't even made this connection yet, but this is season 8 of the show. It was launched on the Lionsgate portal, which is 88, repeating number 8. And I just updated the cover photo to me with Biji, but I tweaked it just a little bit. And so on this episode, you'll probably see, but now there's an infinity halo, the number 8 above Biji's head. And I'm just thinking of him as September 8th too. So there's more of that 8 number coming through. But yes, again, it's so cool to hear you share this story again. I know I've heard it before, but there's something about hearing it now and recording it that feels really special. And thank you so much for bringing Biji into my life.
I'm so grateful that you guys found each other. I can't picture a world where you don't have Biji. And I'm honored to be a part of that story.
Yeah. Okay, so let's keep on moving here. So what we said we're going to do next, so the first was the introduction with Francesca, which we did, and sharing about this magical story with Biji. But next, we're going to share what we love about Virgo and how we each personally work with Virgo energy in our own astrology practices. And then after that, we're going to highlight some of the major transits for this upcoming Virgo season of 2021. And so let's go ahead and start with how we each personally work with Virgo in our own practices. And so I'll start out by just sharing a little bit of information about Virgo so that we can all just kind of start to attune ourselves to this mutable earth sign. So Virgo, embodied health. You know, I bring it back to embodied health all the time on this show. And I think a lot of that is because of my Virgo. So Virgo really is connected to the health of the body, the mind, and also the spirit. And so while working with Virgo energy is kind of paying attention to these 3 different facets of your life: body, mind, and spirit. And I think Virgo, as a harvester, can have this ability to separate really well and organize. And so Virgo can be like, oh, the body's different than the mind. It's different than the spirit. And we can kind of compartmentalize in Virgo energy. You know, this might be like working yourself so much that you don't listen to your body. And it's like the mind is telling you to go, 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 and the body eventually will give out. And so Virgo energy is also connected to illness and getting sick. And that's when we're not listening to the body. We're just listening to the mind, which, knowing when you're moving through Virgo energy, are you more of a mental energy or are you more mercurial? Like if you're a Gemini in Virgo season, you might go way towards the mercurial side. If you're a Taurus, for instance, during Virgo season, you might actually go more towards the body side of it. But this is a time Virgo is saying to Taurus, are you listening to your body? What is your body communicating to you? Maybe instead of like eating this, why don't we kind of fine tune it and like eat this, you know, so that we can start paying attention to the health of our body and listening to the wisdom of our body. And then spirit also comes in and plays a part too. And so holistic healing, mind, body, spirit coming together, not separating. I mean, there can be gifts of separating, but also how are we building bridges between these facets of our life? So Virgo's a digestion. So we can all breathe into the digestion. And those are some of the things that I would like to share about Virgo right now. And then also the esoteric phrase I think could be nice for us to connect with, which the phrase for Virgo is, I am the mother and the child. I, God, I matter, am. So I am the mother and the child. I, God, like I'm spirit. I'm matter. I'm my body. I am. So again, building bridges between spirit and earth. And maybe the mind is also playing a role in building those bridges. So that's just some facts about Virgo. Oh, and Queen of Virgo was named by the Cosmic Cousins listeners in 2018. And that's Beyonce Knowles is the Queen of Virgo. Yeah. So how do you work with Virgo in your own practice as an astrologer?
I have Chiron in Virgo. So, and a lot of people consider Chiron to be kind of connected to Virgo, maybe even the ruler of Virgo. And so I like to really kind of feel into the energy of that. And you were talking about the phrase of I am the mother and the child. And I like to take the invitation that Virgo gives to tend to myself and to take care of myself, make sure that I'm eating well. I see Virgo season as being kind of like a reset where I go back to my daily routines. Am I moving my body? Is my diet supporting my energy? Am I sleeping enough? And also, am I being kind to myself? A lot of times, Virgo energy can reveal ways that you may be talking to yourself in a way that is less than kind, less than supportive. And I also work with Virgo through, it's so nourishing for me to tend to others, which that might be my Cancer moon. I have a collection of houseplants. I currently have 4 plants, and I really get a lot of joy through taking care of them, learning what the plants need, and watching them grow and get bigger and develop flowers, whatever it is the plants do. And I always name them and talk to them, and that really connects me to the Virgo energy. Plants really connect me to the earth water polarity, like Virgo and Pisces, like Taurus and Scorpio, because they just embody how water gives life to earth. And so those are some of the ways that I connect to the energy of Virgo.
Yeah, when you're talking about plants here, it's cool. I have the 5th Spirit Tarot here with me. And so Queen of Pentacles is one of the cards that I use to represent Virgo. I think of queens as mutable, Pentacles as earth. And in this depiction, we see the queen is holding a houseplant. And then there's also a bunny rabbit there. And then there's also more houseplants behind. So when I hear you say that, it's not just about taking care of the plant, but there's also kind of like a communion or maybe even a communication with the plants. Like Virgo as a Mercury ruled sign, it's like, it makes me think of like talking to the earth. And I like that you mentioned you have Chiron in Virgo and that you said that you consider Chiron a ruler for Virgo. So traditionally Virgo's ruled by Mercury, but there are some other planets that I think Virgo can really work with. And that's the whole thing, is when we look at the traditional rulers for the sign, they're really helpful and important. But if you are a Virgo, meditating on Mercury maybe isn't the best, because you might already lean so like towards mercurial. I do think Chiron is a great planet or planetoid for Virgos to meditate on, because it can kind of show Virgo where they are being of service, which I think is a big part of Virgo season and something for all of us to reflect on this year, particularly with the strong Aquarian energies at play that are giving us a focus more towards society at whole, which is we're kind of starting to segue into the Aquarius full moon, which low key kicks off this Virgo season. It's still technically Leo season, but it happens just a few hours before Virgo season. But yeah, and I think since we're both Aquarius and we're connecting to our Virgo placement, there is a great deal of being of service in Virgo, and particularly to the community. I like that we are connecting to Chiron, because Chiron is also a placement in our chart that I think we can compartmentalize our trauma with Chiron. And so Chiron might show how you compartmentalize. And even I find Chiron to be actually a very intellectual planet, and intellect and healing. So it does feel very Virgoan. Is that a word? Virgoan. So yeah. Something else that's coming to me right now in this moment is Virgo is a sign that is often connected to pets. And so it's cool that we're, starting off this Virgo episode talking about like adopting dogs. I think like adopting and fostering, this is definitely something that Virgos love to do, and Virgo energy might inspire us to do. And you were talking about their health. You were like, they have fleas and like, I had to get them vaccines. And so Virgo season is going to bring awareness back to our health, which we're still in the midst of a pandemic. So there might be, things that come up around that collectively, especially with this Aquarian energy. Okay, great. So you have Chiron in Virgo. I have Moon in Virgo, which we were talking about before we even started recording, that Chiron is often an esoteric ruler for Virgo. I've also seen the Moon be positioned for Virgo too as an esoteric ruler. And I really like this because it allows us to feel more into the intuitive sides of Virgo that I don't think get talked about as much. And I also think that the Moon being close to the health of the body and close to the home, Virgo is also, and Virgo energy might inspire us to tend to our home space, to maybe like rearrange our furniture. It's a mutable earth. So it's like moving things around, reorganizing drawers. And so the Moon really does health of the body and the home. And that's a special sanctuary space for Virgo. It's also, now we're like, there's more rulers for Virgo. I mean, Virgo has a mercurial energy. There's just a lot of details that you can use and fine tune during Virgo season. And so we are going to be talking about some asteroid goddesses in the transits. And really, the asteroid goddesses connect us to a lot of Virgo's themes. There's like Ceres, who is the goddess of agriculture and harvesting, so we're going to talk about some asteroid goddesses today. And so when I look at a Virgo's chart, particularly a Virgo sun or Virgo rising, I have to know where the asteroid goddesses are in their chart, because it's almost like all of these different like workers in their chart kind of showing how the Virgo energy might manifest. So if you don't have asteroid goddesses as a part of your practice, Virgo season is a great time to introduce yourself to them. And so we're going to be doing that a little bit today.
Yeah. I'm excited to hear more about that. Your knowledge you have on that.
Yeah, me too. They're newer to my practice. I've been introducing them to my practice maybe the last 2 or 3 years. And I'm just now getting to the point where I feel really confident and communicating about them because I've been meditating on them a lot. So we're going to shift gears now into looking at and highlighting. I'll first highlight what the major transits are for Virgo season 2021. And these were first picked out by Francesca. I was like, hey, maybe pick like 6 transits that you see as the most important for Virgo season 2021. And then I added a few more in there as well. And so you did mention, you're like, well, this full moon in Aquarius seems pretty important to Virgo season. And I agreed. So that's our first one on August 22nd. We have a full moon in Aquarius, and then the sun enters Virgo. On August 25th, Asteroid Ceres is conjunct the north node of fate in Gemini. On August 29th, the sun squares the nodes of fate. On August 30th, Mercury enters Libra. On September 3rd, Venus and Vesta are conjunct in Libra. We have a Venus-Vesta conjunction in Libra. And then right there in the middle of Virgo season, right there in the center of the digestive system of Virgo season, on September 7th, we have a new moon in Virgo. And then the 2 main things that we're going to highlight on the new moon in Virgo is this moon is exactly trine Uranus and Taurus. And then Black Moon Lilith joins the north node of fate in Gemini on that new moon. And then we shift gears after the new moon. As the moon starts to wax towards full, it gets a little bit more watery, I would say. So Venus enters Scorpio on September 10th. Mars enters Libra on September 14th. The sun is opposite Neptune on September 14th. And then we end Virgo season with a nice, delicious Pisces full moon on September 20th. Yeah, so those are the main transits. And again, you can go to cosmiccousins.com and under podcast, click episode 118, and you'll see all of these transits listed out. And we'll also have included in there the chart for Virgo season 2021, the chart for the Virgo new moon, and the chart for the Pisces full moon. And these also include the asteroid goddesses. So again, if you're wanting to deepen your practice with them, this is a great opportunity for you to even start to acquaint yourself with the glyphs, which, by the way, Virgo is the digestion, but it's also the fingertips. Virgo is connected to the fingertips. And I think actually writing glyphs out, Virgo season would love you if you did that. Practice your craft of astrology. So, Francesca, we just named all the transits, and I would like to bring our attention to the Virgo season 2021 chart. And I'm curious, as you know, we had already communicated about these upcoming transits, but as I was saying them out loud, what was kind of a feel that you might have gotten for Virgo season of 2021? And when you look at this chart for Virgo season, what are you receiving at this time? What are you looking at?
Well, I was immediately drawn to the fact that the moon is going to just be entering Pisces as we enter into Virgo season. So we have that beautiful Aquarius full moon, which we're going to talk about. And then as the sun moves into Virgo, the moon kind of continues to balance out the sun. And what I've been kind of feeling into recently is that we've been having full moons like right before we transition into the next zodiac season. And I think there's this emphasis of, as we're in the current season, like we're in Leo season now, we'll be in Virgo season, we're also being really pulled towards exploring the polarity, because the moon is kind of pulling on the sun every time it enters into a new sign. That was kind of the first thing that I was drawn towards in this chart.
Yeah. When I'm looking at this chart, I see a lot of what we're going to be talking about. Like Ceres is in Gemini, and so is Black Moon Lilith in Gemini with the North Node of Fate. And so they're already conjunct. There's already this conjunction of Black Moon Lilith, Ceres, and the North Node in Gemini at the start of Virgo season. So the dates that we share with these conjunctions are just when it is the exact alignment. But quite literally, this whole Virgo season is about Black Moon Lilith, Ceres, and North Node in Gemini hanging out with each other. And as you were saying, you know, you wanted to highlight the node of Fate squaring Virgo's sun. But, you know, Mars and Mercury and Venus just moved through Virgo too. So there was that square action already happening. And then also, if we look to the other side of the wheel, like you're highlighting the Pisces moon, I see Neptune in Pisces, conjunct Pallas in Pisces, which we didn't even have necessarily on our list of things. But I think that's a configuration that's throughout all of Virgo season, is Neptune and Pallas hanging out in Pisces together. Yeah. And Virgo season kind of came early this year because we have Mercury, Mars, and Venus have all been in Virgo towards the tail end of Leo season. And so even us meeting now during Leo season is like, I feel like I'm in Virgo season already because I'm back to work. I took off the last few months. And so here we are. Yeah. So, okay. So that's the Virgo season chart. And so you can always look at the moment the sun enters a new sign and cast a chart for it to give you an overall feel for that astrological season. But we're going to rewind just a few hours to the Aquarius full moon on August 22nd, 2021. So anything that you would like to share about this Aquarius full moon that you're sensing or feeling, or how we might work with this energy?
Yeah, I'm loving this full moon. It is a blue moon, so it's the second Aquarius full moon that we're getting in 2021. And 2021 has, it's awesome. As an Aquarius, I'm loving it. And this year feels so Aquarian to me. So the last couple of years, we were really focused on the Capricorn energy and kind of in a very like shadow work, like destruction type of way. And then something I really felt the shift as Saturn and Jupiter moved into Aquarius. And ever since then, we've been really focused on Uranus and Aquarius. And then we get these 2 Aquarius full moons. And this moment kind of feels like a graduation to me because of how the moon is conjunct Jupiter as it's full. And I think there's some kind of like revelation around what is it that we've really been working on in this Aquarian energy over the last year. And potentially it feels like a sort of graduation, like harvesting type of energy, because we're also going towards the time in the solar cycle where the harvest begins. Virgo season, for those who are in the Northern Hemisphere, is the beginning of the harvest season when we start to take inventory and reap the rewards of all of the seeds that we planted in the spring and that we've been tending all summer. And it is kind of a moment where we get back to work too, because there's a lot of work that is involved with harvesting. But it's a really beautiful energy. I'm excited about this full moon.
Yeah. And this full moon is at the 29th degree of Aquarius in 37 minutes. So you can look to your chart to see where this full moon might be illuminating. And so both Francesca and I'm Aquarius at the 25th degree, you're Aquarius at the 26th degree, I believe. And did I get that right?
Yeah, I think
so. This full moon is on both of our sun, which the reason why this feels important of where is this full moon hitting up, because this is the exact location that Jupiter in Aquarius is visiting 3 times. So Jupiter was in Aquarius and entered Aquarius on the winter solstice of 2020. So this was in December of 2020, Jupiter entered Aquarius and then zipped on through Aquarius, went really fast. So it went by this 29 degree point of Aquarius and then entered Pisces. Jupiter entered Pisces on May 13th. So you can think back to May 13th and kind of ask yourself, what shift did I feel around May 13th from Aquarius to Pisces? And so what I sensed of Jupiter moving through Aquarius that first time was just expansion, Jupiter, of collective consciousness. Like the amount of information that we've all been receiving has just been flooding through, and also people beginning to envision new realities and new ways of being in community. But it also went in tandem with the vaccine. Jupiter entered Aquarius in December of 2020, and the next thing you know, it's like the vaccine is being widely distributed. And so Aquarius is a sign of distribution. It's the water bearer, the baptizer of humanity. And then when Jupiter entered Pisces, May 13th, I know that's when mask mandates lifted here in Oregon, was right around that time. Things were starting to feel really dreamy and like people were gathering again. And so it's interesting. You would think Aquarius energy would be about how are we gathering together. But I actually felt like when it went to Pisces, Jupiter left the sign that Saturn is also hanging out in. So Saturn's in Aquarius. And I think that's really informing a lot of this Aquarian energy is like, yes, it's Jupiter, but it's Jupiter in Aquarius hanging out with Saturn, who's making rules and restrictions for humanity. So Jupiter entered Pisces May 13th. I went to a concert a few weeks later, Pisces' music. I started releasing things. Like I started selling books and tarot. Like I was like letting everything go, Pisces. But then Jupiter re-entered Aquarius on July 28th of 2021. So Jupiter was in Pisces just for about 2 months, re-entered Aquarius, and that's right when the mask mandate came back in Portland, where I am. And so I think that's true in many other places from what I was seeing. And so when Jupiter re-entered Aquarius on July 28th, we were kind of back to the Saturnian rules because Jupiter's in the same sign as Saturn. But I'm feeling like this re-entering into Aquarius is like, well, what did you learn about Jupiter being in Aquarius and Pisces? What space did you clear up? Did you start to process your emotions with Jupiter and Pisces? What endings were starting to come? And now that it's back in Aquarius, there's almost this feeling of like, there's like, how are you revisiting and revising what new structures are being put in place to help cultivate, facilitate, and harvest the expansion of collective consciousness. And so like right now, I really want to do like a month ahead forecast each month for each season. And so this is happening now. I imagine that, you know, there will be new structures that I put in place that help to facilitate all the downloads that I received with Jupiter moving through Aquarius. So this full moon illuminates this. And this is the full moon that is hanging out with Jupiter retrograde in Aquarius, right? And so it's bringing awareness, because then Jupiter is going to station direct and then revisit this same point later in the year. And so just so we have it, I'm looking in the ephemeris now, Jupiter will station direct on, and it will always be in another air season. It will be in Libra season. Jupiter will station direct, let's see here, on it's October 18th.
Saturn also stations direct around the time that Jupiter stations direct, because they're in the same place in the sky. So they have their fullness phase, their retrogrades, and their directs around a few days from each other.
Yes. Saturn stations direct on October 11th, 2021. And then Jupiter stations direct on October 18th, 2021.
Yeah. They're still working so closely with each other, Saturn and Jupiter. And Jupiter was working so closely with Saturn as he moved through Capricorn last year. And that's when the pandemic was happening. So there has been this like really deep restriction of Jupiter for like almost 2 years now. And that Jupiter in Pisces was finally that moment where it was like, I'm free. And then, but there's still unfinished business. He had to go back into Aquarius because there's still things that need to be wrapped up. And we also have the South Node in Sagittarius, one of Jupiter's signs. So there's so much deep evolution to the Jupiter archetype that's happening right now, which is travel and school and basically everything that the pandemic affected. It was like Jupiter related stuff.
Yes. And it's really interesting because if we look collectively as Jupiter re-entering Aquarius, hanging out with Saturn again, it's like kind of like a return to a lockdown in many ways. It's not as severe as the first time around, but there's more talk about, you know, if you're not vaccinated, you can't go inside, you know, like these sort of like restrictions are coming up. But how are you sensing that in your own personal life? Because I'm also like, oh, I need to get back to work. I need to like have a new routine in my life so that I can continue to share information in a way that is helpful and facilitating, you know, the expansion of consciousness. Like that, I'm feeling it in my own life in many ways, in a personal way. And so I am an Aquarius, so it is personal to me. You know, Saturn is on my rising sign right now, and Jupiter is on my sun. So it's like very much personal for me. So if you're listening to this and you don't necessarily feel as personally connected to these themes, again, you can look to your chart to see where Aquarius is hanging out, or seeing any other signs you might have in a fixed sign. Like if you're a Leo, I have a friend that is a Leo and happens to be a performer, and they aren't able to perform in the way that they used to because there's restrictions to their audience, Aquarius. So yeah, that's the full moon in Aquarius. And it again, it's a true blue moon. It's the second full moon in Aquarius back to back this year. And so something light that you can do, because full moons can be a really great time to connect with ritual. This would be a time to, you know, connect to the nervous system, which Aquarius rules over, and do something nice and gentle for that. I like to use amethyst and lavender on my Aquarius altar.
Love it.
I think I'm saying that because we're going to Virgo season, which brings me to the altar. It's like, what crystals and herbs do you have to support that? And so the sun is entering Virgo, hanging out with my Virgo moon. The full moon is on my sun. So this feels like my energy, and I'm really excited for it. Yeah.
Yeah, it is your energy, almost exactly.
Yeah. Okay, are we ready to go to the next point then? So after the sun enters Virgo, unless you had anything else to say about sun entering Virgo.
I don't think I have anything else for the sun entering Virgo. Yeah, we can move on to the next thing.
Great. So August 25th, Ceres is conjunct the North Node in Gemini. And this is the one that I said I would take. So Francesca and I will kind of be alternating who like leads the dialogue on that. This feels so important again because the North Node of Fate, which we're going to talk about more in a moment, because these two kind of go hand in hand with each other to me. But then a few days later on August 29th, the sun, the Virgo sun, squares the North Node of Fate in Gemini. So these do kind of go off of each other, which is nice. So for me, it's like first starting with understanding the North Node in Gemini. And so maybe we can create dialogue around the North Node in Gemini, and then I'll talk about Ceres conjunct the North Node, and then you can talk about the sun squaring it. So, Gemini North Node, the North Node entered Gemini in May of 2020. The biggest thing that I noticed was a shift at that time was the building momentum of the Black Lives Matter movement. And so there was a lot of dialogue, Gemini's communication being created around duality in our world, and racism and anti-racism, literally in our backyard, our neighborhood. So Gemini does bring awareness to communication, facilitating conversations in our neighborhood, and looking at duality. So that's when Gemini entered, the North Node entered Gemini was May of 2020. And I have a few other things I could share about Gemini North Node, but some of them might be some things that you might associate with the Gemini North Node. So what ways have you been feeling into this?
Personally, the North Node in Gemini connects me to how the pandemic brought this awareness around how deeply we depend on large structures and large organizations to sustain our life. Like as the pandemic hit, people were raiding grocery stores and buying toilet paper in bulk. And we're relying on these big corporations to get our food and to nourish ourselves. And when all of that goes away, when we just have ourselves and our communities to rely on, because of the way society is set up, we found ourselves really struggling. So I think the North Node in Gemini, I really felt it as a call to learn how to take care of yourself and your community without having to rely on institutions and corporations, because we're always just going to be like a faceless number to them. We can't put our entire livelihood in their hands. We have to not just take care of ourselves, but we have to really learn how to take care of each other and live in community the way that humans have been living throughout human history. And personally, I really deepened my knitting practice. And knitting it's very Gemini because you have two needles, you're making things with your hands. And the history of knitting is filled with stories like that. Even if you just go back to the World Wars, people were knitting socks for the soldiers. The American Revolution, when people were rebelling against the British and boycotting British textiles, all of the women were spinning yarn and knitting clothes as the men were kind of like being in the front lines and protesting. And that's the energy that I really have felt strongly ever since the North Node has moved into Gemini. And the South Node in Sagittarius is kind of like the taking some of the weight off of how much we rely on institutions, which is Sagittarius.
Interesting. Yeah, that's not how I've been connecting with it at all. So it's really cool to see that other perspective, and it makes sense to me. And I think that's also quite Gemini too. It's like even us having this conversation right now, this to me is a Gemini moment. I think Gemini for me is when we're gathering with others who are like our twins. So like you're another astrologer. This feels Gemini to me, which is a little different than this doesn't feel Libran to me for some reason. Libra feels more like we're in a relationship together and now how are we going to work this out? Gemini is like, you're like my sister, you're my cousin, And so I have noticed with the North Node being in Gemini. And again, for those that aren't familiar with the North Node, in my own practice with evolutionary astrology, the North Node is a gentle invitation towards evolution. And so at this time, we're being invited to evolve the parts in our chart that are Gemini, And so I have noticed there being a lot more dialogue being created. Like I think of like people going live on Instagram, and particularly as twins, like two people going live on Instagram and having a conversation. That started when the North Node entered Gemini. We weren't really doing that before.
Right. And on TikTok too, people always duet on TikTok. Yeah.
Yeah. What is it, like the duet or something option that you can do? Like where someone could sing and then you could even like sing along with them, like record on top of it. I've been seeing a lot of people dancing like as twins online. So it's like quick information. There's been a lot of information and like the need to take in a lot more at this time and to connect to other people's perspectives. But also Gemini it's a sign that connects us to inner child healing in many ways. And I've seen a lot of people, like if we think of short distance travel as a Gemini thing, it's like there's been a lot more short distance travel and not long distance travel, which is South Node and Sagittarius is like world travel. So I've been seeing a lot of friends starting to learn how to like roller skate or like picking up biking or like even bird watching. Like, it's like we've gotten to know our neighborhood.
That's for like, Gemini too.
Yeah. Since this pandemic, it's like May of 2020 all the way through 2021, the neighborhood, many of us around the world have been confined for many months and have picked up hobbies like walking around the neighborhood, seeing the same folks every day on your walks. Maybe you're roller skating, maybe you're skateboarding. And Gemini's the hands and lungs. And these are the 2 points of obsession during the pandemic, the hands and the lungs.
And people have been baking bread from scratch and picking up new hobbies, which is connecting to the North Node in Gemini as well. As we became closed off from the outer world, we started to explore like, well, what can I do inside of my home? And a lot of that is keeping ourselves occupied by working with our hands.
Mm-hmm. And I don't know about you, but since the pandemic, which is somehow in tandem with this North Node entering Gemini, I have really been seeing birds a lot more. Like I feel them more strongly, which feels quite Gemini to me. I'm like into bird watching now. And there's a sense of like me, like I'm looking out at my tree right now and I have a bird feeder in it. And I didn't necessarily do that before. I don't know why. So those are just some more themes that I'm picking up here. And I think this is so Gemini because there's a lot. I could actually talk about the North Node in Gemini for another 30 minutes. Like the downloads have just been flooding through. I never thought I would start making Instagram reels. And I started this week. And it's like, it does feel very Gemini North Node to me like that. It's like, how do I condense this into 30 seconds? Go, these quick bits of information.
Yeah. And with TikTok too, and the very short form video content, that's been a theme in all industries and anybody who does content creation work. It's been, and I've noticed it even in my business helping podcasters. I help them clip out pieces of their podcast that they can use to grab someone's attention really quickly. That like it's a profound idea, but you have to say it in like 30 seconds.
Yeah. And Gemini is like, it's marketing and advertisement. Say like, how am I grabbing someone's attention? And when we think of the inner child healing aspect too, it's like, I think of Gemini as it's light and dark. And so we're moving through a dark pandemic time, but how are you able to still find joy? Maybe I'll go roller skating. Maybe I'll dance online. It's like finding the lightness in the dark as a Gemini too. And so, all of these themes feel super potent because Gemini is the other sign ruled by Mercury. We're in Virgo season. And so because of that, this Virgo energy, the Virgo sun is going to be square the nodes of fate on August 29th. And just before that, again, on August 25th, Ceres is conjunct North Node in Gemini. And really all of Virgo season Ceres is hanging out with the North Node in Gemini. And this feels really important. Why? Because Ceres is the goddess of agriculture, grain, harvesting, and the love a mother bears for her child. I am the mother and the child. So Ceres, like, that's why it's like, if you are a Virgo or you have any Virgo energy or during Virgo season, we need to look to Ceres to see what's going on. And so here Ceres is the goddess of agriculture in this sign of Gemini, which is about information. So already it's like, how are you cultivating and harvesting information in your life? What is it that you're wanting to communicate, and how are you putting systems in place to communicate that? Right now, Francesca and I are mirroring this to you all. We're reflecting this because we're doing this as our first time doing a month ahead forecast. I mean, that feels like really important for me right now too, because I'm starting to put on my website, like I'm doing a whole portion on my website for Zodiac Queens this month during Virgo season. So you'll be able to go to the Cosmic Cousins website, click on Zodiac Queens, and read about each of the 12 Zodiac Queens. Like it's like the Ceres conjunct the North Node in Gemini feels major for us right now. And so maybe it's not what you're writing, Gemini, or communicating. Maybe you're also seeing it in your close sibling-like relationships. Are you collaborating with someone that's like your sibling? Francesca's like my sister, and here we are cultivating together. So yeah, I think that this Ceres energy is, if you attune yourself to the asteroid goddesses, they are more feminine archetypes that connect us to our crafts and to our body. And so if you do have Virgo energy, you'd probably like working with the asteroids. And one last thing I'd like to say about Ceres is that she was known for her contributions to society. She had the gift of harvesting and the reward of cultivation of the soil. And so she was like, people like praise, this is Demeter, you know, this is the goddess of harvest. And you go to her so that you can have food and prepare your grain and corn. And so I always like to look to someone famous who has their sun next to a planet or an asteroid so we can see the light that's being shined forth. And guess who has sun conjunct Ceres? None other than Queen of Virgo. Beyonce is a sun Ceres.
I was going to guess Beyonce.
Yes. So it's like, of course, she's not only Queen of Virgo, but she's got the Ceres energy there. So she is shining that forward to us. And, you know, in many ways, she connects us to that energy of harvest and Mother Earth, the divine feminine, as the fruits of her internal self ripen. And she connects us to, you know, creating in the world and giving back, being of service. So, yes, Ceres is conjunct the North Node in Gemini August 25th. And then that kind of sets the tone, because it's not only Sun and Virgo square the nodes of fate, it's also Sun and Virgo square Ceres in Gemini too. So, but what are you sensing here? August 29th, Sun squares the nodes of fate.
So this date and this aspect really stood out to me because it's the halfway point between the two eclipse seasons, or between the two eclipse portals. And I see squares as being like a crisis of manifestation or a crisis of integration. I like to look, whenever I am working with a square, I like to look at, well, when was the last conjunction? Usually a square is a planet will square right as they're going towards a conjunction with whichever two planets are squaring each other, or they'll square right after a conjunction. And so I like to think about what was initiated during the conjunction. So in this case, what was initiated during the last eclipse portal. And mutable eclipses, I have at least experienced it as really rapid change. I think every time we've had eclipses in Gemini and Sagittarius, I have literally moved houses. And I have observed in the people in my life that every time an eclipse portal comes through, there's been really rapid change. A lot of times change in like the external environment, not just internal change. And so the question that I think this aspect poses is, what changes have been initiated and what changes are you still resisting? Because Virgo is a very grounded energy, but it's also mutable. So it gives a safer and more organized space to initiate changes that might be a little bit more difficult for you because there's some part of your identity that you're still holding on to. There's some part of your past that you're still holding on to. So I feel this square to the nodes as, what do I need to let go of so that I can move into the next phase, chapter of my life, whether it be a big chapter or a little chapter. I'm always beginning new chapters. And I connected to this energy of Ceres on the North Node too. I've worked very deeply in the past year with the myth of Persephone and Demeter. We might talk about it when we get to the Venus entering Scorpio, but Demeter wanted Persephone to stay young and innocent forever. And when Persephone married Hades, she married Pluto, it was heartbreaking for Demeter, and she stopped being the goddess of the harvest. She stopped giving life to the planet, and that's where winter comes from. And so that myth really teaches us about how we need to let go and how we need to allow the next phase of life to come through.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Definitely. And I like that this is a bit of foreshadowing for, later in the month with Venus entering Scorpio. Also later in the month, which isn't something we're highlighting, but it will happen, is Sun and Virgo will trine Pluto and Capricorn. And so there is like this kind of underworld energy coming through. And Ceres, if we want to take it deeper than just being the goddess of harvest, she lost her daughter for half the year, for like a third of the year when winter is. And so I've also seen Ceres show up in clients' charts and also through my own meditations as being the mother. Ceres is the mother of transforming grief through embodied and creative power. And when I think of Beyonce, who is a Virgo sun with a Scorpio moon, she also is going into these deep regions of ancestral trauma and healing. And so the work that she's creating in the world, yes, it is very Virgo-like. She is connecting us to the wisdom of the body and of hard work. But there is this deep scorpionic energy of healing and transforming darkness. So, and we feel that in the story of Ceres. We feel that with Venus entering Scorpio towards the end of the month. And we also feel it with Gemini being the sign of working with light and dark. So there is this kind of like darkness kind of like looming in the background. And even with Sun opposition Neptune, which we're going to talk about, and building up to the Pisces full moon, Virgo season, as practical and hardworking as it can be, it is deeply emotional. And you're talking about, well, what are you willing to like fully release? I think you said something like that, which is that like Pisces polarity. So I like that you're bringing up that this is the halfway point between the eclipses. And so as a reminder, for those of you listening, the nodes of fate represent the eclipse axis. So we had an eclipse during Gemini season, this past Gemini season 2021, and we're going to have another eclipse season in Sagittarius because the north node's in Gemini, the south node's in Sagittarius. And so Virgo, as the mutable earth sign, is that halfway threshold point of the year between the two eclipse axes. And so, yes, you kind of invited us to think back to Gemini season, eclipse season, what was happening. I know for you, Francesca, I think that's when you moved to Miami.
Yes, I moved to Miami during an eclipse season, and I committed to my current apartment on the actual solar eclipse. And I felt intuitive because it was also a Mercury cazimi. And when I came to Miami, there was just something inside of me that knew, like, that was the date that I was going to like commit to my apartment. Mm-hmm. And now as we're in Virgo season, I'm having that process of integrating the experience of moving my life to a new city. It's beautiful.
And so I would imagine here during Virgo season, it's like Gemini, you did all the eclipse, like rapid evolution and movement that Gemini will, it was even short-term travel. It was like not to Cambodia, it was Miami. But now Virgo season, I'm imagining, it's like things might be settling into place and you can start to like organize your life and like be like, that just happened. I moved to a new city. Now what? So I'm curious to check in with you during Sagittarius season to see how that cycle might close out for you. I do know in my own life, I have a friend during Gemini season who left Oregon to go back to New York City. So he got eclipsed back to New York City because the job that he lost during the pandemic, it reopened and they hired him back. But now he's decided now in the last week that he's not happy in New York City anymore and he wants to come back to Oregon. But it's too soon. Virgo season is about him like getting his finances in order and restructuring his life to make that move. And I think it will be Sagittarius season that he finds himself back in Oregon. So just kind of like note these points of the year and see what they're bringing up for you. I find this interesting because the next thing that we have coming up is the next day, and it's August 30th. Mercury enters Libra. This feels so important because this Gemini North Node is answering to Mercury, and so is Virgo's season is ruled by Mercury. And so this is a major shift in Virgo season when the ruling planet changes sign.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and we start to connect to the Libra energy. And I believe the full moons or the lunations, in Virgo season have air trines involved in them, like grand air trines. And so Mercury in Libra is contributing to that. Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah. So this shift of Mercury going into Libra, I mean, some of the most basic things, it's like now we shift more towards balance and beauty, and we kind of look more towards Venus too, which we have this Venus in Vesta conjunction in Libra a few days later on September 3rd. And so there is this, this shift of energy towards relationships and collaborations at this time as we enter into September, like we're coming towards the end of August. And maybe also, social justice, Libra, more of a focus on what's right and just in the world and equal. So I would think with Virgo season being connected to health and like vaccines and things like that, there might be like talk around, well, what is just for us at this time? What is balanced? So what are you sensing here with Mercury entering Libra?
Yeah, and I was actually doing a meditation on Libra recently where it was like a drawing meditation. And I realized that if I drew the Libra sign over and over on top of each other, it created like a ripple effect, like the little bump on Libra created waves. And so Mercury in Libra really connects me to that because Mercury is the small decisions that you make every day. It's the everyday life. It's the Virgo energy. And Mercury in Libra is how do your decisions create a ripple effect in the rest of the world. And so I think there are going to be a lot of discussions around social justice and public safety as Mercury enters Libra. And I'm also connecting it to, we don't talk about this as much anymore because we're so connected to COVID, but also the environment. I had made a note that Mercury in Libra might be a time where I start to think about, I'm settled in my apartment now, so I'm starting to think about how can I structure my life so that I'm creating less waste that's going to go into the ocean because I'm in Miami, so the ocean is my neighbor, and I want to treat my neighbor with kindness. And thinking about that stuff, how is you use a piece of plastic once, and then it has this massive ripple effect through time, because plastic lasts forever. And so things like that coming up. And then, of course, the COVID masks, vaccines, what is the right thing to do? And I mean, it's kind of obvious what the right thing to do is, honestly, because certain actions create a ripple effect of infections. So a lot of conversation around that with Mercury and Libra.
And we feel like I'm feeling that trine that it will create to Saturn and Aquarius, Saturn making rules for humanity and Mercury entering Libra brings a focus to how we're communicating in relationships. I also find that Mercury entering Libra has this energy of it's making me think of we're Libra season starting to come now. Like it's like Virgo season came early. Now Libra season is maybe starting to come a little bit earlier. And so I'm just feeling myself becoming more aware that day and night are starting to become an equal measure. You start on the Northern Hemisphere, you start noticing that the sun is setting a little bit earlier each day. And since this year, the Libra energy is kind of coming in Virgo season, we might be a little bit more aware of that this year than other times. And this also just feels like it could be, and maybe this is getting us into Venus and Vesta conjunction Libra, which is on September 3rd. Do you feel ready to move on to that one?
Yeah, I'd love to hear your reflections on that.
So Venus is the planet that rules Libra. So already it's like Mercury entering Libra. Virgo season answers to Mercury in Libra. Libra answers to Venus in Libra, conjunct Vesta. So Venus is it can be a very financial sign. So Venus in Libra does feel like a time for us to start thinking about how are we balancing our finances. Vesta is another asteroid, which is very much connected to many themes that Virgo might be connected to. So we had Ceres, the harvester, but then Vesta is the goddess of hearth and home. And it's the hearth fire. The glyph for Vesta, it looks like a wide V and then another V inside of it and then a little flame. So there's it's the flame here. So Vesta tends to the flame inside of the temple. And so Vesta is known for keeping order in the temple space, making sure that it's clean, making sure there's food, is heating the water. So it's a lot of domestic themes with Vesta, but in a very devotional, reverent way. And so Vesta being in Libra with Venus, it feels like the question I would have for us to reflect on is, in what ways are you cultivating more of the sacred sanctuary in your place of dwelling? It does bring focus towards the home. And so when I'm thinking collectively, we might see things come up at this time where, Virgo season might call us to volunteer. And with Venus and Vesta conjunct in Libra, it's let me think about the people who are houseless and don't have homes at this time. This would be a collective energy. I'm thinking of a housing crisis, and this is us tending to those who need taking care of. So something you can do in your own life, Vesta is the keeper of the flame. So just light a candle in your home. Particularly here around September 3rd in a really beautiful way. Venus makes me think of buying flowers. Vesta makes me think of a nice candle. Would be a good time for you to bring your awareness to these things in your life, and particularly around Libra, how you're bringing greater balance in your life. And so if you find yourself wanting to work really hard during Virgo season, Venus and Vesta and Libra are saying, maybe what would it feel like if you gave yourself a luxurious morning to be pondering a flower? There's a balance to the hard work of Virgo season that Venus and Vesta and Libra can offer us. And it feels nice because we're here in the waning moon as we reach the new moon in Virgo on September 7th.
Yeah. I love the reflection on self-care, because the Vesta in mythology tends to the sacred flame. And I think in our culture, we're so obsessed with productivity, and we don't put enough emphasis on longevity. And maybe productivity can actually look like giving yourself the space and the love and the care that Venus and Vesta are providing you towards to take care of the flame. Vesta really connects me to the idea of longevity and making sure that you last a long time instead of burning yourself out right at the beginning, trying to get a whole bunch of stuff done. And then it's perfect that we're entering into the balsamic phase period and going into a new moon, because that's a time in the lunar cycle where we have to rest. And again, capitalism would have us being productive every day of the month, but the moon really has this built-in time in the cycle where we're supposed to turn inwards, maybe sleep more, be gentle and kind to our physical bodies, and then we're ready to plant a new seed on the new moon.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And I'm looking September 3rd, when Venus and Vesta are conjunct in Libra, is a Friday, which is Venus's day. And so, maybe gift yourself that Friday off if you can. I'm making a note of that. And I think that is what our capitalist Gregorian calendar would say is Labor Day weekend, which is then that Monday, September 6th, which is the day of the Virgo new moon, is that Monday, the moon's day. So I'm going to share the screen. I didn't do this with the previous chart, but we have the new moon chart here. And you wanted to highlight Uranus and Taurus at the 14th degree trine, Sun and Moon in Virgo at the 14th degree. So
Yes, I did.
New moons, we say time to clear out and plant new seeds. Is that what you're feeling here?
Yeah, I mean, especially an earthy new moon, like I feel it as like very literal, like physical. Like I think the new moon in Taurus, I actually planted an orange seed, and like I asked Florida to allow me to make my home in Florida.
Mm-hmm.
And so that is a practice that I really like I just love plants. So I love to connect that practice to the earthy new moons. And I love that it's in a trine to Uranus and Taurus, because Uranus is kind of a destabilizing energy. It's full of surprises. It often strikes when you least expect it. But being in trine to this very grounded new moon in an earth sign, I feel like there's an opportunity to sort of commune and work with Uranus instead of having Uranus happen to you like it often does. So if there is something radical and big that you want to start in your life, then you can maybe do a ritual around Uranus. Like I felt called to bring up the fact that I planted a physical seed on the new moon in Taurus because I was making a really big radical shift in my life. I was wanting to create my home in a new place. And so I asked the earth and I asked Uranus and Taurus for its help and its support. So if you're in a place where you're also wanting to start something new and big, maybe it's a new career. Virgo's really deeply connected to work and service. Maybe it's a new home. Maybe it's even an internal change, like wanting to deeply commit to your health in a new way. Whatever it is, I think that there's an opportunity to really kind of recruit the support of Uranus during this new moon. And I really feel like ritualizing this, like doing something like a physical act, like setting up an altar and putting out physical representations of what you're wanting to call in.
Yeah. It's cool to hear you say like creating like a new job or something like that. Cause I have 3 different friends right now who are like just done with their like corporate jobs. And that's something that they are like reflecting on this Virgo season. And, you know, every Virgo new moon, it's like Virgo's a sign of work. What is your service? What is your craft? So the new moon in Virgo always has that energy. But when it's trine Uranus and Taurus, it's like Uranus in the tarot is the fool. You know, so we're putting the fool out on this altar for the new moon because we've got this juicy Uranus trine. So there could be this radical desire to take a leap of faith into the evolution of who you are becoming. You know, that's what Uranus is here to support us in the most practical, grounded Taurian of ways. Yeah. It's such a juxtaposition, this Uranus and Taurus energy. But it feels important because Uranus is the modern ruler for Aquarius. And we started Virgo season off with this big Aquarius full moon. And then the new moon is trine Uranus. So there is, you know, Uranus and Taurus has been connecting us to, you know, major changes in the economy and the environment and with finances. And so there might be things that come up for you around these themes at that time.
Yeah, I'm seeing that as a major theme in 2021. Like we had that crisis where there was a shortage of workers in the service industry and the restaurant industry. And it's because the big, powerful people did not treat their employees properly. And people are, like you were saying, people are done. People are wanting to structure their work and their career in a different way because their jobs your job has to work for you too. Like your job is how you show up to serve it. And you show up in service through your job. No matter what your job is, whether you're a doctor or a delivery person, your job is serving somebody, and you're supposed to also be served back by your job. Your job provides you the resources to maintain your life in this capitalist world. And I think a big part of what COVID brought to the surface is like a lot of jobs don't provide that. And that is not just. And Uranus does not like things that are unjust, because Uranus is the ruler of Aquarius.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And this is a major theme for us, is Uranus and Saturn being square each other all year. And so there's 3 moments where Uranus and Saturn are exactly square. So it's nice to have this lunation, this new moon, that is not, Uranus and Saturn don't feel as tense at this time, even though they're still within, what is that, like 7 degrees of each other?
7 degrees, yeah.
But this does feel like a time to reflect on Uranus and Taurus in your life without the restraint of Saturn and Aquarius, even though it's still kind of like looming there a little bit. And another thing that I wanted to highlight on this new moon is that Black Moon Lilith and the North Node of Fate in Gemini are at the 5th degree. So they line up on that day. So connecting to some of the themes that we were talking about, like, you know, Lilith and Gemini, I have a very personal connection to Lilith and Gemini because it's connected to my coming out story. Coming out of the closet as gay to my mother. This was back in 2002. And that was when Black Moon Lilith was in Gemini. And also the North Node of Fate was in Gemini at that time. So there's a complete return to this energy. And I have Chiron in Gemini. And I remember the exact date that I came out to my mom. And so I've cast a chart for that. And Black Moon Lilith in Gemini was at the same degree as my Chiron in Gemini, my natal Chiron. And so Gemini is like words and communication. And so Lilith in Gemini, she's like, I want you to talk about your secrets and your sexuality. So there's like this kind of like, if you're like radically leaving your job or something, Black Moon Lilith in Gemini is like, and talk about how you're a witch. Find your witch sisters, find your queer siblings. Like there's this energy that's happening around this time, especially as it lines up with the North Node of Fate. So there might be fateful new relationships that come into your life, or opportunities for you to share information in an even more wild and sexual and primal way. Because Lilith is here to act as an ally for us to break ourselves free from the binds of our modern patriarchal world. Lilith is like a complete rebellious energy. And so when it's in Gemini, it gets a little more playful, gets a little bit more interested in others. And so there does just feel like a fateful energy around people that you might be collaborating with in a very Gemini way that are other queer witches. And we also know Ceres is hanging out there too. You might be working with them and cultivating some new craft or offering our work at that time. Super juicy. So we know Francesca helps people with podcasting. So this actually feels like a time where you might have some new clients come in, and maybe it's because we released this podcast episode. But yeah, so I'm just particularly drawn to this Lilith North Node moment.
That's breathtaking. And actually my natal Lilith is actually at 6 degrees of Gemini. So that's interesting that it's at 5 degrees. And there's like, yeah, I think there's this energy of, by you expressing your truth, you actually help with the evolution of humanity with Lilith being conjunct that North Node. If you allow yourself to come out as whatever it is, whether it be a witch or whether it be you're a member of the LGBTQA plus community or anything else that you would come out for, you're then creating a world where there is space for people like you. And you're doing humanity a service by being authentically and unapologetically yourself.
It's so beautifully put. And I'm bringing awareness now to Lilith, North Node and Ceres in Gemini, the hardworking queer witch that is evolving, is in a trine with Saturn and Aquarius, who is taking responsibility for community, and is trine Mercury and Libra over here, communicating in a very collaborative, balanced, just way. So we do have this like air grand trine, which I think you had mentioned before, that is present here. And again, Virgo moon, we can look to Mercury as a ruler for Virgo to see, you know, more information. And so there is a lot of this air energy, ideas, communication. So open your windows if you can. Pay attention to like the wind and bring awareness to your body, Virgo, and your breath, the air.
And watch the air change, because we're transitioning into autumn, and the air literally changes quality when we transition into autumn.
Definitely. Okay, so wow, that new moon, I'm excited for that new moon. Okay, so as we continue on into, we could say, the second half of Virgo season, there's major shifts. And so September 10th, Venus enters Scorpio. And on that note, I'm actually going to fill up my water. I have wireless headphones in, so I can still hear you talk. So I'm going to fill up my water while you start talking about Venus entering Scorpio.
Sounds good. So Scorpio connects me to the theme of sacred initiation and the revealing of the darker truths. And the dark I kind of connect it. Just the things that are in darkness, I see them as also being sacred. The taboo is sacred. And so Venus entering Scorpio, there's two different myths that it connects me to. One of the myths is actually Persephone and Demeter. The main one is actually Adam and Eve, the beginning of the Bible. And I have a bit of an obsession with that story. I think it's because I was raised Catholic, but also because I'm an Aquarius. I see Eve as being such a badass and such a rebel, because she was literally created to be just to exist for Adam, to exist for a man. And she felt intuitively that there was something more to life, something deeper. And she initiated all of humanity into the sacred knowledge of the universe. And she did it by communing with the snake, which may be the devil, but a very plutonic, like underworld character. And then it also, this Venus in Scorpio also connects me to the myth of Persephone, who her mother Demeter wanted to keep her young and innocent. She held on to the young and innocent version of her, which I think a lot of people can connect with that experience of having a mother. There's always some part of your mother that wants you to stay young and a child and safe from the evils of the world. And Persephone, there's a lot of different ways to interpret that myth. A lot of people interpret her as being kidnapped by Hades, but no matter how you interpret it, she does ultimately decide to become Hades' wife when she eats the pomegranate seed, and she becomes the queen of the underworld. She comes of age and she grows into her womanhood phase, despite the fact that Demeter, that wasn't really what she wanted. And Eve did the same thing. God did not want Adam and Eve to have the knowledge of the universe. He didn't want them to know the full picture of what the world was. And Eve couldn't help but take the apple and learn the truths. And I think it's such a reflection on humanity's natural curiosity and how we're always going to be seeking for answers. And sometimes that initiation and that truth can feel like such a profound loss, but it's probably in most cases better than living in ignorance. Like learning the truth of like what climate change is really devastating, but it's a lot better than just mindlessly destroying the planet and being unaware of what's really going on. And so those are the stories that I'm meditating on for Venus and Scorpio. And I think the invitation is, what is it that you're afraid of? Like, what truths are you really afraid of? Like, I don't know, like a really minor example that kind of came into my head is like, are you afraid to like check your credit score because you don't want to know the truth of like what your credit score is? Like, maybe it'll be better no matter what, just to look. So.
Yeah, well, that's interesting because Venus entering Scorpio, like when you're talking about your credit score, like that to me is always a time period where because Scorpio is a sign that's connected to, it's a financial sign, and Venus is a financial planet, but Scorpio is particularly connected to debt. So Venus entering Scorpio is a time for you to clear out debt and to like clear out the shadows. And so, and it feels like there's going to be a lot of this opportunity. This is almost like a foreshadowing into 2022, because the North Node will be in Taurus and the South Node will be in Scorpio. And so Taurus being a Venusian sign and the South Node being in Scorpio, it will be a time for us of clearing out that and becoming more embodied. And so Venus entering Scorpio here in the middle of Virgo season, towards the end of Virgo season, it feels like I'm starting to like sense things starting to shift for us. I find it also particularly interesting how that Black Moon Lilith in Gemini, conjunct the North Node in Gemini, is very similar to what you're communicating about Venus entering Scorpio. It's like there's like a shift of going into darker themes around fear. And also Lilith was Adam's first wife before there was Eve. Mm-hmm. And she was kicked out of the Garden of Eden. That's what the story says, because she was too sexual. But Lilith, when you listen to Lilith's version of the story, she says, no, I chose to leave the Garden of Eden. And so there is this kind of like rebellious energy with Lilith and then Venus entering Scorpio around Venusian themes. So practical ways that we could work with that. I always say, Venus likes fashion. So that's something like really simple you can do is like paint your nails black on that day, or like let go of old clothes, or allow clothes to come back from the dead. Like if you want to just do something like really like simple as a ritual, Venus does bring awareness to our items that we have in our home. And so you might even bring out like old books or like old photos and connect to your ancestors. There's a lot that you can do. But Venus is, again, it is connected to our physical items.
Yeah, it's a very practical way to like connect with your feminine side, because we all have a feminine side. And like you were saying, with painting your nails black, the new clothes or the old clothes, you're creating a new relationship with your feminine side, Venus.
Mm-hmm. And Lilith being in Gemini, Gemini's the hands. So there's like, they're working with each other. And you brought up Demeter, which is Ceres. Mm-hmm. Ceres and Demeter. Like there's something with a storyline that I'm really curious for all of us to continue to meditate on. And for me, I'm saying that Lilith and Gemini with the North Node in Gemini, last time that was in 2002 for me when I came out of the closet to my mother, there's the mom again. This theme of I am the mother and the child. And I do know September 14th, I'm going back home to Virginia for the first time in a really long time. And I'm going to be hanging out with my mom. And so it's interesting to hear these reflections come up. And so on September 14th, two things happen. Mars enters Libra, and then the sun is in opposition to Neptune, which is giving us a bit of that foreshadowing, sun opposite Neptune and Pisces, of the Pisces full moon on September 20th. And so maybe we'll start first with Mars entering Libra. This is fascinating because we have a mutual reception happening. Mutual reception in astrology is when two planets are in each other's sign of rulership. So Venus in Scorpio, Mars in Libra. So Scorpio is ruled traditionally by Mars. So Venus and Scorpio will then look to Mars that just entered Libra. Mars in Libra, Libra's ruled by Venus, will look to Venus and Scorpio. So it's almost like a figure 8 or an infinity symbol gets created with mutual reception. It's like they're really collaborating with each other and going back and forth. And so it is fascinating. Venus enters Scorpio, then Mars enters Libra. And so anything that you're sensing like about this mutual reception?
I'm thinking back to the Venus-Mars conjunction that happened on July 14th. This is a conjunction that happens about every 2 years, and it begins a 2-year cycle with the relationship between the masculine and feminine. And I think this is kind of entering a new chapter of that journey, because they're beginning to gain distance from each other, but they're still really talking to each other about the communion that they had back in July.
Mm-hmm. really interesting. And so Mars entering Libra, this is also considered, I believe, both of these placements actually are in detriment. I don't necessarily work with detriment as a vocabulary, but I think Venus and Scorpio is in detriment because
they're
Venus
being
is at
challenged.
home in Taurus. Yeah, and then Mars is at home in Aries, and Libra is the opposite. So Mars entering Libra, it's, you know, that could be a challenging energy. This could be like, you know, Mars being like confrontations and Libra being relationships, you know? And with Venus and Scorpio, it's almost like information could be revealed that escalates into some sort of disagreement. But a way to work with this in an evolved way is Venus entering Scorpio says, I'm honoring my body and not what wants to be released. And Mars entering Libra says, I'm, you know, putting action towards cultivating more balance and harmony in my own life and in relationships. But it's like, I have to, like, I'm going towards it. Like, it feels really passionate too. Like, this could be like a very sexual energy. Like if you're in a relationship and you're not getting satisfied sexually, like there could be some tension, or, you know, open yourself up to new ways of communicating, Libra, about your sexual desires, Mars. There are some of these themes coming up that I'm seeing here. All while in the backdrop, Sun in Virgo is opposite Neptune in Pisces.
Yeah. And when the sun goes opposite from one of the outer planets, and actually Saturn on, those are the outer planets, that's actually the moment in the year where that planet gets closest to the Earth. So when the sun's opposite Jupiter, Saturn, that's the moment that those planets were closest to the Earth. And so this day, what is it? It's September 14th. Neptune gets closer to the Earth than he will get all year. And we get an opportunity to have a very deep conversation with Neptune as we move towards the Pisces full moon. And we've had Neptune in Pisces for a very long time, for as long as I have been aware of astrology, or for as long as I've been on a spiritual path. Neptune has been in Pisces. And so it's kind of like, when I feel into that energy, like, it's kind of like asking what a fish feels like being in water. Like, I don't know anything different than having Neptune in Pisces. So it kind of runs in the background for me. And I don't always feel those themes very strongly in my life, or sometimes things will happen and unfold and I don't recognize it as being Neptune in Pisces. So I think this is a day to really think about what that Neptune in Pisces journey is for you. What house is it hitting? And how is it inviting you to show yourself the deep, unconditional, compassionate love that Neptune really teaches us? And Neptune is actually the higher octave of Venus. Venus is the love that you have for, like, it can very much be connected to like partnerships and romantic love, but it's the love that you have for the people that you know. And Neptune is the love that you have for all beings in the whole planet. It's that like all encompassing, like you look into the eyes of a stranger and you realize that this person has a whole complex life and experience that you can connect with and empathize with. And how is Neptune in Pisces inviting you into that? And how is it hitting your chart specifically? And this gives an opportunity to really reflect on that this day. And we're going to, I think the Neptune in Pisces is going to be a bit more amplified next year too, as Jupiter moves back into Pisces and moves into a conjunction with Neptune. And we're going to really be feeling into those themes. And I also am, it's kind of front of mind because I'm in Florida and there's literally 2 hurricanes right now. But thinking about the way that we have been treating the ocean and the consequences that might come up from that. And then also the fact that the sea levels are rising. And I think that the presence of the ocean is going to be very deeply felt next year. And maybe we get a preview of it in Virgo season. Because the ocean is kind of like Neptune and Pisces, like it's there. It's like 70% of the planet. But we probably don't, especially if you're like an inland dweller. You might not think about the ocean that much.
Yeah. Yeah. And this is, we're kind of segueing into, and then a week after, on September 20th, is the Pisces full moon. And this Pisces full moon, I have the chart up here. It's in a conjunction with Neptune still. There's still this, if they're within 7 degrees of each other. And in my own practice with this Pisces Virgo polarity, and I would imagine many other astrologers would agree, there is this axis is making me think back to the start of the pandemic, really, when it started to flood in a very Piscean way through our collective consciousness, was in Pisces season of 2020 on the Virgo full moon. I remember that was when it was like, whoa, this is real. The pandemic really started around that time period. I mean, COVID-19, the first infection was right at that Saturn-Pluto conjunction in Capricorn on January 12th of 2020, but it took 2 months until Pisces season on the Virgo full moon. And so this is exactly 18 months, this full moon, from the start of the pandemic. So I find myself reflecting on that. And so you can, look at some of the bigger cycles. Pisces full moon always has me reflecting on bigger cycles. I utilize the energy of this time period to kind of go back and look at all of the moon phases from the past year. And I kind of get myself lost in this ocean of just understanding the bigger picture. And I think the reason why I feel that even more at this time is because Pallas is in Pisces right now, which I could share a little bit about Pallas. And Pallas is hanging out with Neptune all month long. There's actually a Pallas and Neptune conjunction that we didn't highlight, but it's on the same day that Ceres is conjunct the North Node in Gemini on August 25th. Pallas is exactly conjunct Neptune on that day. So Pallas is very much a figure that we can look to if you are more Piscean or connecting to more of these Piscean themes of, being in the unknown, being at the end of some massive karmic cycle, being connected to psychic energies, being very sensitive to things going on in the world. This is all Pisces, and finding ways to express that through loving devotion, as a painter, as a musician, as a dancer, as an artist. This is the opposite of Virgo, who is being of service in a very practical way. Virgo is like our nurse, giving us medicine. Pisces is the person coming and sitting by your side and singing you a song and giving you that emotional connection. Or it's the music that you're listening to that soothes your soul. And I also will echo with Francesca that my practice as an astrologer, Neptune has been in Pisces the entire time. Neptune entered Pisces in 2011. And so that was right when my awakening happened, where I started, the floodgates opened right when Neptune entered Pisces. So yeah, having Pallas hanging out with Neptune at this time is also important, because next year, as Francesca was saying, Jupiter enters Pisces, which, by the way, Jupiter enters Pisces basically New Year's Eve and going into 2022. I think it's like December 30th. Jupiter
starts
Pisces
with a bang.
Yes. It starts with like a tidal wave bang of Piscean energy. And what's interesting is that Jupiter-Neptune conjunction that Francesca was for saying we might receive some insights around what 2022 might feel like on this Pisces full moon, because Jupiter will be conjunct Neptune. Pallas is also conjunct Neptune and Jupiter at the same time next year. So there's a pile up. So let's see, do you know off the top of your head when that Jupiter-Neptune conjunction is going to be?
I don't know off the top of my head. I can assume it might be later in the year if you have your ephemeris out, because it would be the later degrees of Pisces.
Yeah, so Jupiter kind of flies through Pisces and then enters Aries for a bit and then goes back into Pisces. So
there's more than one conjunction. Yeah.
I think there's more than one conjunction, but I'm seeing right here. Okay, yeah. 24th degree of Pisces. And this is in the middle of April of 2022. Jupiter, Neptune, and Pallas are all at the 24th degree of Pisces in April next year. So Pallas is playing a big role here. And Pallas is the goddess of feminine wisdom, and is often depicted holding a sword with an owl. And so Pallas is actually bringing a very discerning energy here of saying, no, what is truth? Cut through the fog of Pisces. Allow yourself to connect to your higher truth. If you're feeling really at wash and sensitive to all of the paranoia and the conspiracy and the energy going on in the world, because again, we've got the North Node in Gemini, we're receiving all of this information. This Neptune and Pisces is saying, I don't know what's true. What is reality? Pallas says, you know your truth. Connect with it.
Yeah,
so
we need that right now.
Yeah, Pallas is here for us as an ally. And she was in Aquarius when Saturn and Jupiter aligned in Aquarius, and she was hanging out with Saturn and Jupiter in Aquarius last year. So I've been really connecting to Pallas and Pisces, and I feel her presence here. And I will also be releasing a workshop download on the Pisces full moon, or like a few days before the Pisces full moon. That is, I haven't decided if it's going to be on Neptune or Pallas yet, but by the time this episode's published, I'll have announced which one, but it will either be on Pallas or Neptune. So yes, this full moon feels really illuminating. You know, Pisces new moons can bring in a lot of kind of understanding and acceptance, especially with Pallas being there, bringing in some understanding about the bigger cycles. And so when you're talking about even the ocean, bringing our mind to the ocean, Pallas is also, she's a warrior for justice. So there is that element there. And I don't think everyone works with Pallas. You know, it's if you feel connected to these themes, particularly, I feel really connected to Pallas because Pallas is on my midheaven. So I feel very attuned to Pallas, and I connect Pallas being on my midheaven as being an astrologer. I think Pallas is very aware of big cycles. She's feminine wisdom, so she gets a bird eye view. And so Pallas being in Pisces with Neptune is saying, yes, there's a lot of changes and shifts happening, but how can you observe it through an astrological lens and look at cycles? So all astrologers are working with Pallas, I think. That's part of my downloads anyway.
Yeah, I love that. And I'm also thinking about Athena in Greek mythology and her relationship to both Jupiter and Poseidon. And she was actually born from Zeus or Jupiter. She came out of his head. So it's interesting that she's kind of following the main transits that Jupiter has been making recently. And her relationship to Neptune or Poseidon, I believe, she accidentally killed one of Poseidon's daughters, and she took her name, Pallas. And so there's this energy of forgiveness too. And the forgiving yourself for the mistakes that you've made, and maybe even large scale forgiveness for all of the things that have happened the past couple of years with the pandemic and all of the hardship we've been through. So there is a healing redemption energy as well.
Yeah. And being in Pisces here, it does highlight the parts of that story that you're talking about of forgiveness and letting it go and, connecting to spirit. I mean, Pallas and Pisces, it feels like spirit guides, Pisces being very boom, sharp with you. There could be that kind of feeling of if I'm a little bit out of alignment, spirit's going to let me know. And so, yes.
And that's a good way to work with the Pisces full moon too, because Pisces encourages us to release so that we can prepare for the next cycle to begin in Aries. So maybe a forgiveness ritual is something that you would be called to do during the Pisces full moon, and extend that compassion to yourself and to others. Forgiveness is always about yourself. It's always just about you being able to move on. And so you might feel called to a practice like that.
Yeah, and with Pallas bringing awareness to bigger cycles and having a bird's eye view, and thinking of Pallas as an asteroid connected to astrology. Astrology, looking at past transits, has really allowed me to forgive the past and to say, oh, that energy I was moving through with that person, oh, look at what transit was going on at a time. And so Pallas does bring in a bit of that intellectual side of it. And So astrology is also here for you to lean into if you are wanting to release something or forgive something, particularly on this Pisces full moon. And again, everything that we're talking about is some foreshadowing for major themes in 2022.
Totally. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's the last one we have. We end with this big illumination of the Pisces full moon, and then we go into Libra season. Yeah.
And then the fall equinox. Yeah.
And fall equinox on the northern hemisphere, spring on the southern. And one last thing I'd like to leave us with, since it is Virgo season, Virgo does call us to the earth element and to particularly like small items we have, like, you know, little trinkets or tchotchkes or like I think of like organizing my crystals or seashells in a row. This feels very Virgoan to me. And I wanted to end on this image because we did talk about the North Node in Gemini today, and we're in Virgo season, but I have this little stone. It was just a rock that was painted by my baby niece, green, and then she put little pink dots on it. And the reason why I want to bring that up is because North Node in Gemini is also inviting us to go towards our nephews, our nieces, and children. You know, Gemini is preschool to 12th grade. It's early education. And so I'm also thinking about Virgo as a back to school time of year. And I know that there's a lot of shifts. And so it's interesting just to kind of go back. We were talking about, you know, the node of fate being square to the Virgo sun on August 29th. That's literally like right around when a lot of kids are going back to school, and some of them are, you know, going back to school with mask mandates. Some of them are going back to school without mask mandates. And there's a lot of dialogue and confusion around what is truth there. And also some are staying at home. So there is this kind of turning point. Again, Gemini North Node is connecting me to our children. And then the sun being in Virgo is connecting us to the new routines that we're putting in place. But I just feel this stone as being connecting me to both Virgo and Gemini right now because my niece gave it to me. So I did want to share that. I had forgotten earlier, but it feels nice at the end of our conversation to bring it back to some sort of physical item. And so wherever you are in your space right now, listening to this and receiving this information, maybe you find some sort of little item that's small that you can pick up that will be there for you as an anchor with this big Pisces full moon that we're going to have. And also as we're working with this very mutable Gemini and Virgo mercurial energy, your little items are there to help you. So I'm going to be carrying this throughout Virgo season. Do you have any little items that are coming to mind right now, Francesca, that you might call upon?
Well, currently I'm holding this crystal that you gave to me when I brought Biji. We didn't share this part of the story, but we met in Denver to pass Biji off, and you gifted me with this beautiful crystal. And I hold it whenever I podcast because it's blue, which connects me to my voice and my communication. And it's always next to me when I'm working.
And we didn't even talk about this, but the last time the sun was squared the node of fate was in Pisces season. And that's when we met halfway in Denver. And I received Biji in my life on the Virgo full moon, which is exactly 6 months ago. So here we are on the other side. I didn't even make that connection until now.
Yeah, I didn't notice that either. But I mean, of course, everything with that whole journey has just been so, there's always some very perfect astrological alignment accompanying it. So, of course.
Totally. Well, again, thank you so much, Francesca, for joining us here today on Cosmic Cousins. Again, for those of you listening, all of this will be have visual components on the website at cosmiccousins.com, and I'll have links there where you can get in touch with Francesca and find out more about Francesca's website and podcast. And do you offer readings at this time?
Yes, I do offer astrology readings, and those can be booked through my website, the one you have linked. My podcast and astrology stuff currently have the same home. So if you find my website, you have found everything.
Amazing. Okay. Well, thank you everyone for listening in today. Remember, you can bring your awareness back to your digestion. Take a deep breath here and take sweet care, cousins.
Thank you as always for tuning into the show. If you enjoyed this, you could leave a review on the iTunes. 5 stars would be preferred. And also the Asteroid Goddesses Awaken to the Cosmic Healing in Your Chart 4-part workshop download is up on the website for enrollment. So again, go to cosmiccousins.com to check that out. Please share this with your friends, your community, your loved ones, and follow me on Instagram. I'm on there posting every once in a while. I've been posting reels, cosmic.cousins on Instagram. Happy Aquarius full moon to you if you're listening to this live, and I hope that you have a really sweet Virgo season 2021, and I'll see you for the Virgo new moon in just a few weeks. So take sweet care, cousins. And remember, deep breaths.